Hello, and back again on the Jay Show. This is Dr. Jay Smith, and I have been here now with my good friend, my good conspirator. We've done an awful lot in the last 13 years together. I'm back here in London. I immediately pulled you up because we need to talk about current affairs. And you're the man to do that because you're involved, you're politically adept, you have been part of the whole establishment, you've been seeing the trends that are going on. As long as I've known you, Alan, you're the one I always go to find out what's really happening on the ground, what's happening politically, what's going on socially. I tend to get up in the theology and I get into that whole area, but really the man on the ground is you, because you are, not only do you understand it, you live it, you're amongst it, you live and knew him. Surrounded by Muslims, you're watching, your antennas up, and because of that, you have a much greater understanding of the social issues, the political issues that are going on than the rest of us, and that's where we want you to help us today. We want to really talk about some of the difficulties that we've been having with immigration, but more specifically with the choices this government makes in the UK. And the one I want to bring up is the most celebrated case, the Pakistani Christian lady, Asia Bibi. Give us her story, give us the background, and then I'm just going to let you go with it. I might interject and pull you back to try to make sure that to define terms. But really, this is the area you know best. Tell us the story about Asia Bibi. Why is she important, and what is the problem with her story vis-a-vis what's happening here in Britain?
Sure, I'm happy to. Asia Bibi was a Christian village woman with a family, with a husband and children. I think they were the only Christian family in the village in Pakistan. And she had an altercation with her fellow women who were out in the fields picking berries, I think, about water. And because she collected water and drank from the same water cup or offered the same water cup that she had drunk from to the Muslim women, they got into an altercation there and then, altercation about...
And the problem was that she was considered to be dirty, because she's not a Muslim.
Yeah.
And she had then sullied the cup.
She had, absolutely, and a Christian had drunk from a cup that was there for Muslims. So they had a debate and a very angry discussion about the relative religions of Christianity and Islam, and that was okay until maybe 4 or 5 days later, a band of men, apparently encouraged by the local imam from the local mosque, came and beat her up and attacked her and so on. In the end, she was arrested and went to trial for blasphemy, and this went on for many years.
So she was arrested for her protection, or she was arrested for blasphemy?
She was arrested for blaspheming. That's those accusations.
Okay.
And the court case went up and up through the Pakistan legal system. She was found guilty at lower levels and sentenced to death. And she was lived on for many years.
Back up right again. Sentenced to death. Hold on. Now, people watching this say, no, wait. For blasphemy, which means to say something against the God or the Prophet Muhammad, if you say something against Allah and the Prophet Muhammad, or even for drinking sullying a cup, death, where does that come from? What are you talking about here?
Well, this is presumably it comes from the Quranic verse about apostasy, does it not? That actually people that blaspheme the Prophet.
That's for rejection and returning back and leaving Islam. That's chapter 4, verse 89. But this is fascinating because where is there in the Quran any verse that talks about being killed for blasphemy? That doesn't exist in the Quran.
So therefore, presumably it's cultural, but of course in Pakistan it's cultural, it's legal, because in Pakistan there are blasphemy laws. Because it's the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, they have blasphemy laws.
It's called the 295C law.
That's right.
Which has nothing to do with the Quran, actually, interestingly, because that doesn't exist in the Quran. I know I've had Muslims that argue this, that is anathema. It is based on, it really is based on Pakistani law, which is fascinating to me, because Haq, who was the guy that actually put it together.
That's right. He was president, yes.
He was the one that actually introduced it, 295C law. And it was not just against non-Muslims, it was also against other Muslims. In fact, I think it's been used most popularly against Shiites, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ahmadiyas.
It's used it's a deeply unfair one, because I understand, we read about it, that it's used where there's sort of commercial disputes between Muslims themselves.
So anybody could use it.
Anybody can use it and say, you have blasphemed the Prophet.
Or I owe you something.
Yeah.
I'm going to say you blasphemed against the Prophet, and you blasphemed against the book.
Yeah.
Therefore, take you to court, and that shuts down any need for me to pay you.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see how that could be abused so quickly and so easily. In this case, you drank from the wrong cup. So what happened next?
Well, she was sentenced to death at lower courts. It worked its way up until, I think, the beginning of last year, it reached the High Court, the Supreme Court of Pakistan, and they declared that she was not guilty and that she should be freed. Because there was such hostility towards her right the way across Pakistan, the authorities decided that she shouldn't immediately be released from prison, although she'd been found not guilty. Indeed, there was a great uprising of demonstrations against Asia Bibi by fundamentalist Muslims, but saying that death to Asia Bibi, death to Asia Bibi, that the Prime Minister of Pakistan agreed that the High Court ruling about her could be reviewed. There was an appeal against that, and that was reviewed again. It went back to the High Court again, the Supreme Court, the top court, went back again. But again, she was found not guilty. And then the problem was what happened. It was generally recognised that the most important thing was that she should be got out of the country. She would never be safe again in Pakistan. There were too many people who wanted her dead.
And by this time, her family had already left.
Her family had already left. And so earlier this year, the British government was approached. Now, there are historic links through colonialism and many other ways between Pakistan.
Pakistan used to be, well, it was India, was before 1947, it was a colony of England.
A colony. So there's long...
And there's still the Commonwealth today.
And part of the Commonwealth with strong cultural ties and other ties and so on. So it was an obvious place for Asia Bibi to come to.
Absolutely.
Come to yeah, just because of all these huge links, okay? And we understand the application came in, and while senior politicians, such as Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary.
Sajid Javid actually argued for her case.
Apparently,
wanted her to
yes, and so did the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt,
argued for her case.
But the civil servants working in the government apparently put the other case to the Prime Minister and said, Theresa May, if she, Asia Bibi, came here, there could be community disturbance. The opposition, the violent opposition to her in Pakistan would transpose itself over to here in the UK, because we have very large Pakistani backgrounds or Pakistani heritage communities over here as well. So the concern was that expressed to her. So because of this, although we like to consider that we're a society that's open to genuine refugees and we welcome them, the government turned her down. And in fact, she's ended up, I think the Canadians have opened their doors to her, and she's now living in Canada with her family. But it's the dynamics of this that actually, as a society, we have become so hostile, with exceptions like Sajid Javid, who himself is, of course, a Pakistani background, is an atheist of Pakistani background, our Home Secretary is. But we have now become so hostile to Christians and to Christianity that even we won't take one in, because actually we've become a prisoner to Islam as a society. And so we're more concerned that the Muslims might rise up and create community disturbance or look to kill her.
Can I give you another example, personal example? Geert Wilders, that name is he's a Dutch politician. He put together a movie called Fitna. And we wanted to, Lord Pearson, I was working before I met you, I was working with Lord Pearson and Baroness Cox, and we wanted to bring the movie to the House of Lords and show it, but we wanted to bring him there personally so he could actually introduce it. So we flew him to Heathrow Airport. While that was happening, Lord Ahmed there in the House of Lords said, if you bring him here, that we will have 10,000 Muslims outside demonstrating. That's all he had to say. When Geert Wilders landed at Heathrow Airport, he was turned around, put right by a complaint back to Holland. Now, he was a sitting member of Parliament. This is the first time that I know where a sitting member of Parliament was denied entry into a member state, a European state, ever. And what was fascinating, when Geert Wilders didn't show up, we went ahead and still showed the film. That night, I went on BBC into Question Time, and actually, not Question Time,
Newsnight.
Newsnight. And I was there with Majid Nawaz. What's his name? Majid Nawaz. He and I actually took on Keith Vaz, who is the Home Secretary, who is the one that denied Garrett Viller coming in. And we asked Keith, why was the reason that you denied his entry? And did you look at this movie? He says, I don't need to look at the movie. It's not important. Proving that the only reason that he denied his entry was because of that threat. One threat, one Lord, that he was going to bring 10,000. We went ahead and showed it. There was not one Muslim outside. Not one. None showed up. They didn't need to show up. All they needed was a threat from Lord Ahmed. And that shut down any entry to Garrett Viller. So there's a personal example where that happened to me as well. So you can see this has been pervasive. This is not just now that it's happening. It's been going on for quite a while.
No,
but this is disturbing to me.
It's part of the privileging. I mean, historically we're a Christian society, have been for 1,500 years, but now over the last couple of decades or so, it's the decline and the dismissing of Christianity by the powers that be and the privileging of Islam. There's absolutely no two ways about it. One is being pushed down and the other is coming up. Christianity is not particularly assertive about one. It's not necessarily built to be assertive because of the example of Jesus, but actually you can bet your bottom dollar that the Church of England, our national church, will never stand up for Christianity anyway because they're the national church. So the privileging of Islam as the rise of Islam and the diminishing and decline of Christianity is a real factor in our political and social life over here. And Asya Bibi came into that sort of thing. So because there was an increasingly loud voice from Muslims, the Prime Minister decided, I'm sure she would personally have welcomed to have Asya Bibi in. I can't believe she wasn't sympathetic to Asya Bibi's situation. Right. And indeed the Prime Minister, Theresa May, is the daughter of a vicar.
Yeah,
so I'm sure at that level, but politically she realised she absolutely couldn't. And she said, well, we're not going to risk having disturbance, have more upsets, more riots on the streets or whatever from the Pakistani community. Therefore, we won't accept her in.
The principal thing to do is to protect those who are being persecuted. That's the Christian thing to do. That, to me, it's a no-brainer. That seems logical. Of all people, Asya Bibi needed protection.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely extraordinary. But it's part and parcel of something else. I mean, the whole thing, it's well known now that we have, as a country, have agreed to take in a significant number of Syrian refugees. Yeah. And I've just happened to have got the figures here. Listen to this. In the first quarter of 2018, that's last year, first 3 months of last year, the UN asked Britain to take in 1,358 Syrian refugees for resettlement in Britain, of which only 4 were Christians. Okay, of 1,000, only 4. Britain agreed to settle 1,112 of these refugees, and all of whom were Muslims, and refused to accept the Christians. And that was just one particular quarter. This
unpack that. You're going.
Oh, sorry.
To me, that just sends red flags everywhere. Why does that get you bothered? Because first and foremost, if we are a Christian nation, who do you think we should be?
It's not just that we're now no longer a Christian nation. We're a nation that's hostile to Christianity. We've moved from being a Christian society to the political discourse, underlying the political discourse in the culture. We are now hostile to Christianity.
But to me, there's still other flags that they're raising. Wait a minute. Who are the ones that were the most persecuted in Syria? What was ISIS against? Who were the ones that they were persecuting the most? You saw those pictures in Aleppo where they had Christians who were crucified and had their hands and feet cut off. That comes straight out of chapter 5, verse 33 in the Quran. He who stands against Allah and is a prophet, crucify them and have their hands and feet cut off. And the guy was putting his finger up to God. And the pictures that you saw there, those were Christians in Aleppo. The ones that were the most persecuted were 2 groups. That was the Christians and the other group, I can't remember. The Hasidics. They were the ones that were most persecuted. Of all people who should be protected the first, should be them. Why are all the Muslims being put first and foremost?
Well, the problem is, it's even worse than that because they get a double persecution. Because let's say they all go into refugee camps. then actually the Christians are in the refugee camps with the Muslims, and it's absolutely quite clear they then get a double persecution. They're avoiding ISIS, so they're taken for protection into the refugee camps. They're then doubly persecuted against because all the facilities are kept in favour of the Muslims.
Yeah.
Soon, as always, you find dominant community leaders even in a refugee camp, and they make it absolutely clear that the
so it's reproduced. What was outside in the real world is reproduced inside the refugee camps.
So they're trying to escape, like other Muslims are trying to escape ISIS. So they're put into a refugee camp, and then we find that the British government discriminates against the Christians who are being doubly persecuted, and accepts the Muslims who are only being singly persecuted.
Isn't that fascinating?
And that is all because of the whole multicultural identity politics, politically correct politics that we have today, this whole dominant discourse, which is actually privileging Islam and diminishing and controlling Christianity.
And I'm looking back here, the article you sent me, this is not just an isolated case. This is the same thing that happened in 2016 and also happened in 2017.
Sure. It's well recognized.
It goes back almost in every year this has been going on. Goodness sakes, all the way back to this decision was made despite, that's fascinating that when you look at the population of Syria, as of pre-2011, up to 2011, 10% of the population was Christian. It has a much longer history in Syria than Islam does. They were there 600, 700 years before the Muslims were. And yet it's fascinating that the UN has a bias number-wise, and that the British are falling into that bias.
Yeah. It's deeply sad and deeply worrying, really, but it's where we're at. And so consequently, these Christian refugees suffer doubly. I mean, that's
70,000 Yazidis, yet in 2017, not one of them was chosen.
Yeah.
So it's not simply just a bias against Christian, it's a favoritism of Islam.
Yeah, absolutely. Privileging of Islam.
Privileging of Islam, as you put it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, this to me is it seems almost an oxymoron. I remember I think it was just about 2 years ago, the Hungarian government was asked to invite so many refugees in to get their quota, European quota, and they made a stipulation that they would take immigrants providing they were only Christian. Huge vilification, enormous reaction from the Western press. And then they went one step further. Says, listen, there's a reason why we're doing this, because we are Christian. We want people to come to our land that are like us. Why is it that other neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, which are Islamic, which have lots of wealth, the United Arab Emirates, why aren't they taking these refugees?
Oh, it's simple. They know what they bring in. They'll bring in terrorists amongst them. It's well known that's what they're doing.
They speak the same language. They have the same culture.
Sure.
They have the same religion.
But the Saudis are sensible about this thing. The Saudis could easily do it. They've got multi-millions of tents waiting for Hajj, haven't they? They've got tents. They could easily put refugee camps for them in Saudi. They've got the facility. They've got resources and so on. But the Saudi government know if you bring in all these refugees, you bring them all in like that, amongst them will be jihadis and IS agents and the rest of it. So they're very sensible.
But they've got
the additional thing that actually if they don't take them in, they know the Europeans will, and they want Islam to take over Europe anyway. So that's all part of it. So if we refuse to take them in as Saudis, the Europeans will agree to take them in.
Oh, so
we don't have to spend our resources.
This is dawah at its best.
Yeah,
dawah means it's their Arabic word for mission. This is missionary enclave. So to send the Arabs the Muslims to the Europeans, because we know that every one of them could be a possible missionary, a daist. Yeah. That's a great way of doing it.
And Europe governing classes are full of Angela Merkels who think this is a wonderful idea. It's going to rejuvenate Germany if you have 1 million predominantly Muslim young men coming in, and it's going to, I don't know what it's going to do. Is it going to help your industry or something, and manufacturers and all that sort of thing? Do you think
without realizing that almost all of these are unskilled, and they're certainly not to the skill that Germans demand. Germans have one of the highest and most difficult skill demands for almost any industry in any place in the world, along with the Japanese. It's fascinating. But I mean, getting back to this problem of discrimination and this privileging of Islam, where did it all begin? Why specifically Islam? Why is it in almost everything that we have been talking about? We talked about the problem with the churches that were being burned, We didn't even get into the cars that were being burned in Paris a number of years ago, and they only ever mentioned that these were youth. Nowhere did they ever mention these were Muslim youth. We went into the whole problem, difficulty of the sex groom gangs, and how that not only the government, the counselors, but the police were protecting them and would not confront the perpetrators. And it took, you say it was going on for 30, 40 years. I thought it was going on for 20 years. It's pervasive, and the numbers are staggering. You're saying as much as 250,000 of these girls were raped. How many men are we talking about if we're talking about 250,000?
I don't know. I haven't tried to work that one out.
Because that would be even more men.
Yeah.
For every woman, you were saying in one room there would be 5 or 6 men. So you're talking possibly...
One 13-year-old girl could be forced to service up to 10 men in one night on a regular basis. I mean, it is beyond barbaric, Jay, beyond barbaric.
We talked about also the Parkfield Primary School, and here you have finally the Muslims are standing up and saying enough is enough on their side. We started out with that one, which is almost on the opposite side, and we as Christians are coming alongside them because we have the same agenda, so we can participate with them. But when you start going back a little deeper and seeing, there's underneath all of this, we do know there's a secular bias, but if it's a secular bias, why is it that they are, and the bias is against Christianity, why would there not be the same bias against Islam? Since we are both people of the book, we are both faiths that start with the Book of the Man, we are both faiths that have a religious principle that goes back centuries, goes back eons. Secular Britain, secular France should be equally against both Christianity and Islam, yet we're not seeing that. There seems to be a bias for Islam, as you say, and against Christianity. Help me here.
There are a number of factors. I think one of them is the rise of Islam. Let's say over the last 30 years, the rise of Islam. It has come into our societies in the West, and particularly into the UK, when our governing class, our political class, is already suffering from post-colonial guilt, and therefore words like patriotism and so on are not accepted amongst the sort of dominant discourse, the political class and so on. So we're already suffering from post-colonial guilt. Into that comes Islam, but Islam comes in as an ethnic minority religion, and therefore worthy of protection. Now, so do other religions come in, so does Hinduism, and so does Sikhism, and so on. They come in. But the Muslims come in greater numbers, and there's a missionary faith. Hinduism isn't a missionary faith.
Back up a bit. Muslims come in greater numbers. Why?
Because we let them come in.
No. There's another reason. Why is it that Muslims come in greater numbers? Which Muslims are always given priority? Those that are refugees. Where do you get refugees from? Where there is conflict. Which countries are in conflict?
Yes. Middle East and elsewhere, yes.
What are the 4 countries that are on the list that are permitted?
But that's not fully true, Jay. I mean, a lot of majority of Muslims in this country have come originally from South Asia, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, the 2 big countries, and also from India. The partition of India and Pakistan caused all sorts of problems, but basically a lot of them came across after the Second World War, as indeed the Windrush generation came from...
so you have the Jamaicans coming in
as well, to help rebuild our industry.
And those waves, I understand, I understand. In the Commonwealth agenda, in the Commonwealth categories, I understand, because they are part of the Commonwealth. What I don't understand is this enormous onrush now. Well, I'm beginning to understand it, especially since 2014. The million that have gone to Germany. I don't know what the numbers that have gone to Sweden and Finland. In almost all of these European countries, they're taking hundreds of thousands each. Almost all of them are from 4 countries. Pakistanis are getting in. We're finding them in the Greek camps. But they're not allowed to go beyond that. Many of them are being sent back. What's fascinating to me is these are all coming from Muslim countries: Iraq, Asia, Libya, and Eritrea. Those are all 4 Muslim countries. If you come, and now there's an enormous wave of them coming in from Somalia, a 5th country. Yeah. We're getting them in America that way.
It's to my way of thinking, is all part of the European global elite are deliberately trying to destroy the historic culture of Europe. and they want to replace it by a sort of globalist approach. So the way to do that is actually if you bring in a confrontational religion, i.e. Islam, to bring into the UK, when already Europe's Christianity is on decline as well. It will help undermine the whole of that culture, and that is absolutely deliberate.
But Alan, stop and think. I mean, okay, I get it. They want to have something that is equally robust with Christianity, and they will shut down Christianity. But are they not looking and seeing the testimony, the witness of what Islam has done when they come to power? Are they not? Or do they not see the Al-Qaeda and Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab and ISIS and Tablighi Jamaat that we talked about earlier, and the Jamaat Islami? These are not. These are not small.
It's very simple. They see but don't look, or they look but don't see. They can hear but don't listen. They really don't see that as an issue. It's as an issue that hard right bigots and fundamentalists, Christians and people like that will get to see.
Could it be that those who are making these decisions live in lily white neighborhoods where they never ever see them? They're not their neighbors.
Absolutely, they're simply not interested.
I mean, something that Tommy Robinson keeps on talking about.
Yeah,
as much as I have to listen to him, he's saying, you people haven't had your neighborhoods filled with them. We've had to. They're taking over our schools, they're taking over our restaurants, they're taking over our dress codes, they're taking over our hospitals. We have to live with them, and they're bringing their culture with them. They're not assimilating like the others do. And I want to go one step further than that. I love that answer because I agree with you. We're full-hearted on that. See, I can't get into a lot of these countries as a missionary. I'm a full-fledged missionary. My parents were missionaries. All my aunts and uncles were missionaries. I come from a huge missionary family. We go back 100 years, my family, to India. 1913, we first were there. So I've grown up in mission field. And this block after block after block, we can't get into the Muslim world. And if we do, we have to go in as tent makers. We have to have a job. Now, millions are coming here. And the majority of them are Muslims that are coming here. This is the first time that actually we have them on our doorstep. This is the first time they have them in our schools. They're in our jobs. We're rubbing shoulders with them. We don't have to go there. They're coming to us. Why don't we be the ones to invite them home? Why don't we as a church take this job? Why don't we just take this responsibility on us? And let's, instead of wringing our hands and saying it's all hopeless, let's say, hold on a minute, maybe it isn't so hopeless. Because I can't imagine a better people to go with the gospel than the people who are coming here, who at some point are going to go back to the host company. Let's bring them home. Let's make them part of the kingdom, and let's let them be the better missionaries because they know the culture, they know the people, they have the relationships, they already have places they can go to. And let's get them, let's bring them home and get them as
Christians are obliged to preach the gospel just as much to our Muslim neighbour as to our English atheist neighbours, to our Hindu. We're obliged to preach the gospel, to witness to Jesus Christ wherever we do it. But the great forces behind it, in my view, the great force behind it, at the moment, our society in the West, certainly here in Britain and across Europe, has said goodbye to God. Okay, we have said goodbye to God. And my guess is, I don't know this, I don't have a hotline to heaven, but my guess is God is sitting up there in heaven and saying, okay, you think you can run your society the way you want to? I'll just take my hands off. And we are judging ourselves. He's not judging us, he's just standing, as I understand it, and I have no hotline to God, but he's sitting back in heaven and saying, okay, you think you can run your society your way? Let's see you do it then. You're bringing judgment down on your own head. And I think that's what's happening to Western society and to Britain. And unless there's a revival, unless he has mercy and brings a revival, in my view, we will no longer be Britain in 50 years and 100 years, not in any record.
I don't want to end with that message. What I want to end with is, folks, listen, take advantage of it. Get to know your Muslim friends. They're all around you. Bring them home. From this book back to this book. From the God behind this book back to the God behind this book. From Issa back to Yeshua. And let them go back into their own countries and let them be the missionaries that where we can't go, they can go. Thanks so much, Alan. This has been terrific. I'm learning so much from you. Come again. Let's do some more of these episodes. We need to have an awful lot more yet to unpack. This is Alan and Jay here in London. Over and out.